And I'd now like to turn things over to Steve Schaefer from AMP Energy, who will speak to some practical considerations for solar PV installations. Hi, Steve.
Hey there. Thank you so much, Catherine. Good afternoon, everybody. So great to be with you all. Again, my name is Steve Schaefer. I'm a partner there at AMP Solar. With me today is our delivery chief, Taras Bishlibnik. And as you guys stump me on the technical questions, I'll be glad to step in. As a key component of so many different decarbonization strategies out there, we're just so pleased to be talking to you today around our insights around the practicalities and some of the gotchas potentially on distributed solar. So I'll share screen. Pardon me. You guys see what I'm seeing, my presentation?
Yep, perfect. Thanks.
Fabulous. So just as far as an agenda today, wanted to talk through really 5 or 6 basic things. Wanted to obviously give you some introduction around us, talk through our view of the transition that we're all running through at this point in time, then get really granular in areas 3 and 4 around what development implementation looks like, and certainly a key aspect of any development cycle, an ongoing operating cycle, is that O&M program. And then focus right at the end around one of my favorite projects and give you some insights there. So AMP has been around since 2009. We're a proud Canadian-based entity. We started our lives basically as a result of the Green Energy and the Green Economy Act of 2009. I'm sure many of us remember way back then. We have approximately here in Canada about 132 megawatts of projects that we have developed, deployed, and built. 670 projects. A lot of that is with school boards and the broader public sector. And again, the balance of that is with one very large project with Toronto District School Board, in which we developed just over 540 roofs and about 70 megawatts. So that's one of the largest distributed solar deployments globally. We've also expanded into other technologies out there, wind, storage, and flexibility. And flexibility is something that we'll all hear so much more about. We'll touch upon in this discussion. Flexibility services, and we've deployed, amongst all those projects, around $1 billion of capital in this marketplace. When we look at our platform, we've typically been on the green side of the ledger. We have been in the asset side. We've spent the first 8 years of our lives really augmenting that. So again, we felt solar, wind. We have a big hydrogen plant, green hydrogen plant now being developed in Australia, in fact. But then we're also getting into what we would see now as real technology that's underpinning flexibility. And that's, again, utility scale storage, behind the meter storage, but also EV charging infrastructure. In 2019, we bought a digital platform out of the UK. It's really a machine learning, a data-rich machine learning and artificial intelligence platform. And we did so very strategically to really optimize the green side of the ledger. And that is, as this whole industry transitions, you'll hear more around flexibility as a service. You're going to need that digital platform moving forward to really optimize the hard asset side of the equation. Want to level set a little bit around the energy transition. Again, all of us, and we know this is underway, we're all seeing this at this point in time. You've heard about the 4Ds potentially, which are the key drivers. And we're seeing this virtually in all the markets that we're operating in. Decarbonization, we know that is really a key driver. really the cheapest source of energy has been solar and wind, but it's really the bottom two, the digitization and democratization, that are really the focus for us these days. These are what's really creating that profound change out there. Digitization really allowing you more and more control over your loads. And then that democratization works hand in hand as a regulatory enabler to actually monetize and actually allow the individuals that are managing these assets to generate revenue from that flexibility and the assets that they potentially have on site. If I look at the next layer, really on the transition, and that is the Ontario market, it's a really compelling market in our view because it's really one in flux. We're seeing local carbon pricing, and the previous group touched upon where that's potentially going. It's definitely going up. We see it to 170, whether it gets there, who knows. Then you've got a lot of uncertainty around how does the most recent COP26, how does that inform requirements moving forward across the country and then provincially. It's the last piece, the first bullet and the last bullet, that I think really are most compelling, and that is here in Ontario, we're seeing, and we're right in the middle of this whole market renewal. And where there's change and where there's these renewal programs, there's going to be opportunity. And again, it's very important to have the right infrastructure in place to take advantage of how these things shift. Bring it sort of a little further to home, and that is, what's happening in your backyards more than likely, and that is as a result of real four forces. And there are others, but four primary forces, which is that increase in global adjustment costs, not just for Class A's, Class B's, but all market participants, all loads. In addition to that, transmission distribution charges getting higher and higher all the time, but also power quality and resiliency, that infrastructure being, we're seeing that get older, it's aging. It's really creating this momentum for customers to take more control of their energy consumption. And really what is enabling that at the end of the day, and that's significantly lower costs of all these technologies that we're talking about, whether that be solar, wind, storage, and all the technology enhancements that we've talked about just quite recently. So when we look at the intersection, in fact, of technology enhancements and cost reductions in one of the markets that we play in, and that's the solar market that's most relevant in this discussion. This is, in fact, a National Energy Board survey or analysis rather, of perhaps now 3 years ago, that compared the cost of solar generated electricity to default supply utility rates and where it made sense. And you see here, green is good. So green is in fact a savings to default utility electricity price. And again, knowing that this is 2 or 3 years old, you can just see that the value proposition is even bigger these days. So, answering one of the questions that I get most through our travels is, are we really cost competitive with default rates? Here's a third-party validation of that. Also, perhaps just to be a little bit provocative around, what we're seeing as an energy ecosystem of the future. I'll just put this up just to maybe as a thought provoker. That is, if you look at the right side here, you're seeing the facility with real intelligence moving forward. We might not see this all today, but this is sort of where we're heading. And there's more complexity behind the meter. You're going to have solar, distributed resources. You're going to have battery. You're going to have obviously HVAC and potentially charging infrastructure. As we heard, you're certainly going to have geothermal moving forward as the market moves to electrify everything. So what's really going to drive that and make those assets more efficient, effective, and optimized is really what will likely be sort of a cloud-based optimization platform. And that'll really take inputs from both sides. One is from market data, from weather data, from what's happening with the ISO and other parameters, and the site data, and then optimize what's happening behind the meter. And then as you see here, also offers an opportunity to potentially, looking downstream here, and the regs are becoming aligned, but even providing a facility, small facility, medium-sized facility, or an aggregate of facilities to actually participate in the market. So just something to think about moving forward. So here's really getting in the weeds around, the practicalities, some of the processes, or a detailed view of distributed solar, whether that be rooftop or carport development in Ontario, so or globally for that matter. So just looking at the sort of the first phase, the key phase obviously is that scope validation and contracting. So doing your feasibility study, looking at what your resource looks like, doing some analysis, and providing perhaps a preliminary design. What is the capacity you can potentially get up on that roof? Looking at that roof and the structure, doing that electrical survey. A couple of key aspects that we typically and we'd urge everyone going down this path to look at is, is there interconnection capacity? That's a real thing here in Ontario. You see a lot of constraints. You see a lot of dark zones. So you have to look at that early on in this process. Then moving down from there, you do more detailed design and engineering, and that will inform really what your budget needs to be. You look at that price, you look at that that budget, paybacks, and then potentially move into the contracting stage. Obviously, all key aspects of the development process. Then we look at the pre-development, pre-construction, project development, pre-construction. So before you're really building anything at this point, and that is, it's a matter of all the regulatory and building permit acquisition. You create an issue for construction design package. That's a very detailed design package. So you're directing your EPCs appropriately. You'd work with the ESA. And at that point, I'd suggest that you're at a milestone, what we call in the business notice to proceed. So, at this point, you can feel comfortable spending real money, and that's on the procurement. You look through procurement, you'd align all your insurances with your key vendors. You look at the schedule and obviously ensure that at some point there's going to be some facility outage, and you can't get too far ahead. You really have to plan that way out. So I guess the point being, there's going to be one, and it should be planned. And then obviously you want to have good communication and ensure you're meeting with the right resources. The construction piece, obviously a lot of bits and pieces to tie together. There's health and safety. There's the second bullet point here around this whole roof protection, temporary walkways. That is critical. Again, depending on what your infrastructure looks like, if it's a single ply roof, this again is even more important. But then installation takes place, you do your interconnection, and then you run through all the way to testing, commissioning, and then close out. And then the key aspect is going to be, and we'll talk much more on this in greater detail, and that's what we call asset management. I know that might be a confusing term to some, but in this business, we term it asset management. It's really an OM and operation and management type of platform. So as we talked about, a key component of our strategy, or any strategy really, and we talk about this quite frequently, is rooftop solar, whether that be a small portfolio or an individual facility. Key dynamics, it is easy. It doesn't require available land. When I say easy, it is, it's become, very not unique. It's something that's very easily financeable. Banks are lending against this, very well understood in the marketplace this year. Maybe not 10 years ago, but certainly it is these days. You have limited contention with your operation. In fact, after mobilization, the workers are on your roof. You really don't get too much insofar as interruption. It's great from a project visibility and community engagement aspect. The development cycles are relatively short, specifically in projects that are under a megawatt, lower regulatory requirements, certainly compared to ground mount. But one of the key constraints, obviously, is you're limited by roof structure. If I look at some key considerations and just, providing detail around engineering and distinction with construction, I don't want to see these as showstoppers. These things you need to be mindful of. Key pieces, we talked a little bit about ensuring that there's available interconnection capacity. Orientation is a key aspect here, ensuring it really influences yields and performance of the system. The roof is a key piece, type and pitch. A lot of the questions that we get fairly regularly is, I don't have a flat roof, I have a pitched roof, or I have a unique roof, I have a domed roof. There really isn't anything that we haven't seen that you can develop on. But really, it's a racking consideration piece. Shading is key as well, ensuring you're getting the yields that you're supposed to be getting. And then I'd say there's secondary pieces, path to your electrical room, how long are the runs, these will influence cost. Construction, some of the key pieces to be mindful of is you're going to need to plan around craning, mobilization. We talked a little bit about roof prep and protection. That is key. You want to have a roof protection plan before anybody gets on your roof, a roof loading plan, and then obviously have safety protocols, just moving down that list, and then ensure that you have a strategy around site access. On the car park side, so it's similar, but it's distinctive, and that is you really are creating something that has what I'll call built-in availability. You're basically buying I won't call it prefabricated, but it is a racking and design, a system that is designed with capacity. You don't have roof considerations. These are obviously elevated. It provides additional benefits like shading. We see a lot of car dealerships moving this way. Very few obstacles. The downside, typically, somewhat more costly with the racking mechanisms, fewer options, and there's more accessibility to public. So you have to look at security. Considerations are very similar. I'd say initially on the engineering side, you want to ensure that you're designing the system to ensure that you're meeting some target, meaning I want to decarbonize X, so it requires this size system, because again, they're quite modular, and you can build a system small all the way to, in the megawatts of capacity. Interconnection, as we've talked about, so similar to on the rooftop side, certainly as far as the engineering pieces are concerned. On the construction, there is some nuance, obviously. There is typically you're working off the ground, which is you're working at height, and that's something you need to be mindful of as well. So lift equipment is going to be required, but still, you're going to have to devote some areas to your parking lot to staging and storage. I'm just going to work through this really quickly, obviously, just in limited time, but battery storage is really the glue technology out there. It really is the most flexible distributed asset that you can find. If you look at the sort of the value wheel, sort of the bottom left there, really talks about all the value that it can provide, not just to customers, but the ISOs and utilities. Core applications in this market really are like peak load shaving for global adjustment mitigation, time of use mitigation. We're starting to see more as costs come down, built for backup power resilience. Moving forward, as we talked about, as the markets are in flux, we're also talking about how do you actually benefit from providing services to the ISO, and that's upcoming, and there's certainly ability to do so. A couple of key considerations certainly are going to be, what is that use case and what's the best chemistry for it? There are different chemistries that provide different parameters as far as duration, as far as thermal properties and things of that nature. So duration, location, all these pieces are key. Warranty and performance guarantees. That is something that absolutely needs to be well thought out, negotiated. And then that third I'd also highlight the third to the last point around how are you actually going to dispatch? What is the platform that you're going to do that with? There's an O&M aspect, obviously. So our recommendation would typically be to engage a full service project integrator. I wanted to talk a little about, in a more detailed way, I should say, around operations and management. So what really is it? So there are really a couple of key aspects, but you need to think about it really as sort of monitoring the system, optimizing performance, and then as a result of that, maximizing the asset's value. But you see on the left, contract management, compliance management for any FIT agreement out there. You'll know you'll have significant reporting issues or requirements for domestic content and things of that nature, all the way down through monitoring and reporting. Reporting is a key as well, obviously. You know, a good O&M package will have monthly reports and quarterly reports, providing all the details that you might require. We're always asking our travels around, you know, what are the O&M details here? It's really three categories. One is overall system, active system management. The other is, the second one is preventative maintenance, and then corrective maintenance as the third. So, you know, management is all about monitoring on a daily basis, utility coordination, firmware updates as required. And you should see a little bit around what those cost parameters are, $4 to $6 per kilowatts peak. Preventative maintenance is the bulk and the highest variability as far as cost is concerned, really dependent on the characteristics, the location of the system. But you know, you potentially are looking at, even on the roofs, vegetation management, obviously for more from a ground standpoint, snow clearing, things of that nature, desoiling, washing, maintaining the inverters. You know, those are key aspects of your preventative maintenance, and then corrective maintenance, obviously, as needed. But you see a total cost that always should be factored in, $12 to $26 per kilowatts peak, highly dependent on scale and system, and is it one system versus 10? But it gives you a format there. Wanted to also get you quickly our view around, you know, a financial view of key parameters here. You know, we've listed 7 or 8 of them, and the metrics, you know, array size, really any small to megawatts, construction costs, you know, measured in kilowatts DC. Again, these are typical ranges. You can get smaller or lower, you can get higher depending on system and type. Yield is key because it really informs, it's the foundation of your revenue model, and that is what is the kilowatt hours that system will provide. One key question was always around asset life. You know, we're looking at 30 years, and module manufacturers now are actually warranting or guaranteeing performance for 30 years. So, you know, started at 10 years ago, now we're at 30. So you have a 30 plus year asset. Performance degradation, that's a thing. For the modules do degrade annually. You have to factor that in. We talked about O&M. One key piece that is often missed is, you know, while you have a 30-year asset, 35-year asset, your soft point is really going to be your inverter. You're going to have to replace that at some point in time. Our models typically have that, you know, after year 10. You've got interconnection fees and permitting and regulatory. So that we whipped through that, likely generate a bunch of questions that we're happy to answer. Just wanted to show quickly one of the projects that displays, you know, some of the nuances around carport development. This is Oakville Trafalgar, what was originally when we built this in 2015, New Oakville Hospital. You have a 600 kilowatt DC carport, 20-year feed-in tariff agreement. Our scope was to develop this thing and also to put LED lighting throughout. So you can really see how custom this system is. Also, you see a little bit around you can put solar on virtually any sort of racking system, and you see how we call it the wave. You see how nuanced this racking system is. This was a pretty tight timeline. We did it from August 17th to October 3rd, and which is for system development, that's pretty tight. The system is performing well. It'll produce this system will produce something in the range of 720,000 kilowatt hours per year, and it will offset somewhere around 115 tons of CO2 per year. So that's really it from my side. I know I've gone a little bit long, but there's a lot of material to get through for sure. So not sure if there was any questions that we were seeing.
We have a question. Steve, do you have any experience with bifacial PV panels and your thoughts on these?
Yeah, absolutely. And trust me, have more data. We do. We're seeing much more of what we're developing these days, whether that be rooftop or ground mount, as bifacial. Now, bifacial, typically, though, you'd have to take advantage clearly of being able to absorb on both sides. So you're looking at the benefit. If you have a roof system that's perhaps a white TPO, you'd see enhanced benefit of that. But there are some applications in which it lends itself nicely, and others that really don't.
Great. Anyone else? If you have a question for Steve, please feel free to ask it now. Steve, I had a bunch of questions myself, but it looks like you have answered all of them in your presentation, which was very thorough. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, it's good to see. I think it's an asset class, Catherine, that people are starting to really understand, perhaps, in contrast to 10 or so years ago. I think people are starting to see how simple this potentially can be. Tough to deploy, but simple in concept.
Right. Yes. Yeah, for sure. So that was really fantastic information. I think you've really given a lot of information to the municipalities and really given them some practical things that they should be considering before undertaking such a project, or things to consider with current installations. So I think that was super helpful. If anyone has any questions or they'd like to explore anything further, please feel free to reach out to Steve or myself and I can connect you. Definitely.
Catherine, thank you. And thanks to the team. And we appreciate being on today. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.